got a couple things I need to get mine out.
Notwithstanding everybody's horrible Black Friday war stories, apparently.
Bro, it was a bloody war.
You
So-
just see people grabbing everything.
Yeah, they grab it just to grab it, and then they just like, what if they don't want it?
Look. Oh, this isn't what I wanted. And then it just disappears into the void. And then you'll find it 2 days after when you have to clean up.
How are we feeling about wheels and tires at this point?
Simple.
Make sense? Alright. The next thing we're going to come into, and we're going to jump into today, is steering systems. Now, it's going to sound like kind of a dead type question, but ultimately, what is the point of a steering system?
Control of the vehicle.
So, and in particular, the main part of control with this one is pointing it in the direction you want it to go.
Yeah.
There's an important distinction to be made here because
Guiding.
the other part, when we talk about suspension, it's still going to be about control of the vehicle. But suspension is going to get into, because like one of the groups yesterday in a video I was grading talked about suspension having primarily to do with the comfort of the vehicle. Comfort of the vehicle does have to do with suspension, but its primary job is control. Remember, wheels and tires are our front line, right? But if the wheels and tires don't stay in contact with the ground, can they do any of their work?
No.
If there's airspace between that wheel and that tire, it's an unhappy life. Okay? Now, so what components make up the steering system? Hmm? I didn't hear it. Believe it or not, the axle doesn't, because I can have a steering system that doesn't have an axle involved. I got one that does have an axle involved.
Steering wheel, hydraulics, wheels.
So,
Steering column.
the steering wheel, steering column, we'll stick with that for the moment, gearbox, because it could be one of a couple of things. Hydraulics in the sense of the power assist.
Yeah.
So we said wheel, we said column, gearbox, hydraulics. Well, I'm asking about components. So what components are involved? Diff is not, because the diff actually doesn't do anything with the steering. It's similar to the axle. I can have the steering system with or without. Thank you. All right. Let's start at the main part that everybody goes to. Whatever our gearbox is. The reason why I say gearbox is because I have two different types. This is a rack. Okay? Now, it is close to, Andre, can you do me a favor? There's an aluminum rack right up there. You can me that, and if you can me that steering wheel. Yep. All right. So, this is where you're sitting. This is where the magic starts. The wheel. Whee! Okay. It's going to go down through a shaft going to go to this. Okay? Then that is going to move a gear that's on the inside in here, which is going to move these either that way or that way. And then the very end of this is going to be
Can you do me a favor? The strut that's on the floor right there, right?
yep,
Can you hand me that?
thank you. This. All right, hold it straight up. This will go into here. All right, this gives you a rough approximation. And then as I pull this way and push, okay? So when you turn the wheel, you turn this, moves a gear in here, which is either going to push or pull, and it's going to turn this. So our components are going to start at the steering wheel, go down through a steering column, which is going to be made up of one or more intermediate shafts. It's going to come down to a rack, which is either going to be center mount or end mount, because it's talking about what they call the inner tie rod. Then the movement's going to go to the out from the inner tie rod to the tie rod end, or outer tie rod. And that's going to move our knuckle, otherwise known as a knuckle. And see that little piece that comes off the knuckle that the outer tie rod goes into? That's actually got a special name. It's called the steering arm. You've heard me use the term the Ackerman angle. Yes? This sound at least vaguely familiar? That Ackerman angle is set up by that little steering arm. Every knuckle, that steering arm is going to come off the knuckle a certain way. The way it comes off the knuckle is what sets up the Ackerman angle. Because when I pull the wheels this way, it's going to make the angle different on what the turn is. So, well, the Ackerman principle or angle is actually a lot of other angles altogether. Well, you're not going to calculate it because you're not an engineer. What you're going to do is you're going to make sure that all the other angles line up. Back in the day, or if you do it on a heavy duty truck, you might be doing it with what they call stick and string. They actually have a tool, it's called a trammel bar. It's just basically, it's a metal bar, but it's a precision instrument. It's measured precisely when they make it. And you put the points on it, it basically lets you create reference points, and you measure between them at the front of the tire. Then you do it at the back of the tire. That's how you can measure toe. If you do it on automotive, anything up to medium duty trucks, and even some heavy duty now, you're going to use a rack and alignment machine. Because the computer already has the specs in it. So the computer knows what the measurements are supposed to be. And then you're going to take them off the targets. And we do this pretty much as soon as we get back from midterms. So next Monday, we're going to start playing with the racks. And the reason why we do it then is because it's a mix of two systems. Steering and suspension end up going hand in hand. A couple of you guys, when I asked steering component, said strut. I didn't include that when I said it. Strictly speaking, struts are not considered part of the steering system. However, if you wanted to ask me, I wouldn't say you're wrong necessarily. Your book's not going to like it, okay? Which means the test may not like it. But real world, if you told me the struts are part of your steering system, I'd agree with you. Because remember, when we were playing with the rack with this, you saw as I moved it, the whole thing turned, right? Doesn't that mean the strut's got to do turning too? So guess what? The whole thing is impacted. Now, what components have I not talked about so far with the steering system? Because there's a whole section I didn't even mention yet. Power assist. Anybody ever drive a vehicle without power assist? How's it feel? You got a He-Man it. At least if you're going slow, you have to He-Man it. If you're going at speed, usually it kind of flies.
helps, but somewhat.
So, I'll dig up a pump later. So the first stuff we get into with steering is the power assist. And I'm not gonna lie to you, conventional things, that's gonna be 90% of your work with a steering system. Is gonna be the power assist. What connects to this guy here?
Your steering column.
Your steering column comes down here. Now, specifically the intermediate shaft. See how there's two lines or two openings for hoses there? Look, a cradle, just like a baby. See these? That's where your hoses are going to come down. Okay, they're going to come from the power steering pump. So you have a reservoir that holds the fluid. There's a line from the reservoir to the pump, and there's a line from the pump back to the reservoir.
So what are those two lines connect to?
There's also lines from the pump down to here, and from here back to the pump.
Oh, good, right back.
Now, well, because here's the thing. When you're not doing anything, when you're sitting there at idle, first of all, what turns the pump? What turns the power steering pump? What makes it do work? Does it have magical fairies in it? Does a unicorn make it work?
It would be your belt.
Yes.
But it doesn't determine, like, does it matter?
Stop, I didn't ask any further.
Oh.
I said, what makes the pump work?
Yeah, your belt.
The belt, which is connected to what else?
Your engine.
Your engine, your crankshaft.
Your alternator, your engine.
So anytime your engine's running, what's the pump doing?
It's pumping.
It's pumping.
Running.
It's pumping, okay? Now, you're going to get one of Mr. Fowler's pet peeves. Pumps do not make pressure. Pumps make flow. Pressure happens when I try to restrict that flow. It's like putting your thumb over the end of a garden hose. Make sense? No thumb, all you got is water flowing. Thumb, we have pressure. Lost the difference between a garden hose and a pressure washer. Everyone with me so far? When the pump's turning and you aren't doing anything, the fluid's literally just coming down, coming through this, coming back out to the pump and going back to the reservoir. That's it. It's just cycling. Okay? There are seals in here. Actually, see how these two lines go to each side of this? Right in here, there's a seal. The minute I start turning the wheel, I move a valve. So if I want the car to turn and I'm turning it to make everything go this way, guess what's going to happen? The valve's going to turn to send fluid to this side, because then it'll push on there. So as you are turning, it's helping push that way. You turn back the other way, now it pushes on this side, and the fluid that was over here gets pushed back through the valve, back up to the reservoir. Make sense? Now, remember I told you there's also a gear in here. Because, believe it or not, this used to be a big deal. This was called rack and pinion steering. This was like an oh my gosh selling point. Because this bar is one long gear. Let's see, I think I have one. Is kind of tore up. Ooh. Second shelf. Can you grab it? Yeah, there's a rack back there. Yep, that'd be her. You're doing a great job at it. All right. I'm pulling this one out because the boots are already off and you can see it. See that? See how there's teeth cut in it? That's your rack. There's a gear right down here so that as I turn this, oh, this one not so much. Yeah, that's, okay. When it's operating correctly, you can turn this, and instead of that popping noise, you actually have the teeth of the one gear pushing this, or well, we're really pulling it back the other way. See if I can kind of get her to sit. There we go.
So go back and forth based on how you think.
See? So as I'm turning this, it's turning a gear down here.
It's just one gear.
Well, this gear meshing with
But
the teeth in the rack.
Yeah, but it's just. one
Yep,
gear.
that's all it is. However, think about it. You just heard it popping at first, right? Were the teeth catching?
No.
So, you only got a couple of teeth on that gear, contacting a couple of teeth with this at any one point in time. Trying to move the weight of a whole vehicle. Can you understand why power steering was necessary?
Yeah.
Because if we didn't get some help along, there ain't no way that you turning this little wheel made this happen. What do you think the original power steering was, by the way? Hmm? Even before brake fluid.
No,
Bigger steering wheel.
Oh.
Your steering wheel is a lever.
not a
The
good.
bigger I make this, the less effort it takes for me to turn the shaft and turn that. That's why if you look at like older delivery vans, they got a wheel like this. Where they had the little knobs on them. You would get the knob, that would be your point, yeah, that you could grab and yank it.
Even your old hot rods.
Those things are so good.
Especially your SRT.
Now,
Bulky Dodges.
so we already talked about the fact that I got a pinion, I got a rack, I got a valve. By the way, what the heck does this look like? Anybody that's played on a car at all, modern car, when you see something covered in this like black rubbery type stuff, it's one of two things. Either it's got grease in it or what else could it be? What's something I want to keep dust and dirt out of? What about electronics?
Sensor.
Well, some of them will have a sensor, but even more now, a motor. So this actually has what we call electric over hydraulic power assist. Meaning you have your pump, but it's also got a motor in here to help start turning the pinion shaft. Because guess what? The minute I start turning the pinion shaft, what's that do to the hydraulics? Doesn't it move the valve? So if I use a motor to help you start turning it, and then let the hydraulics pick up, you get like super assist, right?
Yeah.
So now you get that one finger.
Is that so just in case I
No, it's to make it so that I can make a 2,000-pound car that you have to put in next to no effort to turn. That's why.
Basically make
Notice, do you see any hoses on this one?
no.
Do you see anywhere to hook up hoses on this one?
No.
So what do you think this has? 100% electric power steering. There's a motor somewhere up here on the shaft that when you go to turn the wheel, that electric motor is going to help you turn this. Oh man, brave new world. Okay? That's the reason why, if you notice, this one is not at all easy for me to try to make move. Well, it's meant to be turned by an electric motor. It's meant to have a lot more torque than what my arm is just going to generate doing this. I could probably get it to turn if I put vice grips up to here, gave myself a little bit of a lever. Now, one other thing while we're talking about racks I want you to think about. See these two spots? What do we use those holes for? In. Yeah, mounting. If this isn't stable when you go to turn the wheel, are the wheels going to turn?
No.
All this is going to do is go in. Your wheels will stay straight ahead, I assure you. So we got to mount this to the car. We also got to make sure that when we go to turn, the shock that this is going to feel, the something absorbs it. Otherwise, you're going to feel it up in the steering wheel. So usually these have a little bit of rubber in them. If you don't believe me, look closely. It is there. Okay? What do we call it when there's a bit of rubber
A rubber mount.
kind of holding between a bolt and a mounting surface? What's that rubber called? A bushing. That is an important term. If you don't know what it is, know it now because we're going to be talking about it in the next 2.5 weeks. Okay? Bushings are going to become a major point of your concern. Anybody want to take a guess what happens when one of those bushings goes bad?
Vibration.
You're going to get a vibration. Guess what else you're going to get? Excessive effort needed during steering. I go to turn the car, and it doesn't seem like it wants to turn until I'm about 3/4 of the way into the turn, and then all of a sudden, it seems to want to go. Because that's getting play in it. The rack's going over until it finally stops. So, you gotta do a visual on this. So far we talked about a rack. We talked about what are the 3 types of power steering I've talked about with you. One
Electric.
was electric. It's electric. Boogie, woogie, woogie.
Fully electric.
What was the other type? Because you just said the keyword, fully electric, so what was the other one? Okay, hydraulic. So if we said fully electric and we said hydraulic, what's our third option? Electric over hydraulic.
It's a combination.
The combination, it's like this one, where I have the motor that helps me.
So it's both.
Yep. I jam both into it. Now, if I'm going to tell you, you got an electric motor, whether it be that it's 100% your assist, or the electric motor is helping you control the valve for the hydraulics, either way, what's the electric motor got to have so it knows what to do?
Computer.
Okay, it's got to have a computer, I agree with you. Depending on what automaker you're going with, that's either going to be the PCM or the body control module, one of the two. So it's got to have a computer. It's got to have a computer, and it's got a motor. I'll give you that part. What other item does it have to have? Power's assumed, okay? Because without power, we ain't got squat. Think about it. I gave every computer system is going to have an input side and an output side. We just talked about the output side. The output side is the motor from the computer to the motor. It's got to have a sensor. It's got to know what you want to do. Again, you don't have a unicorn living in your car. No unicorn, no way to tell the computer unless you got something electronic in there that does the job.
Is it a wireless sensor, or do they actually have wires running to it?
Oh, you're gonna make my life hard on you, Joe.
Of course I.
At least you're honest. All right. Depends on the year we're talking about.
I just assume everything now is wireless.
Well, it's a wired sensor, but the question is going to be how much of a physical connection is there from the steering column to this? There's still a connection. However, remember this rack here? Are all electric? Boogie, woogie, woogie. Okay? I'm not relying on the steering column to do most of the turning. Most of the turning is going to happen because of the motor. So I'll show you a video of that, but there's a motor on the steering column basically. And if you were to look straight down this steering shaft, I'm going to pass around so you can do that, you will see the actual amount that I can connect the wheel to the steering shaft is minimal. Yeah, you want to sign off. Get him. Alright, I want you to look down the center of that steering wheel. As you guys look down it from the other end, does it really look like there's any easy way to mount a shaft in that? Such a way that it's locked in and can turn?
Well, I would presume that the engineers designed it to fit within the slots.
You're funny. here's the thing, as you look down that, what you're gonna find, if you look straight down that shaft, is it's a straight circle. If I put a straight circle and a straight circle, are the two gonna lock into each other?
No.
Now, after that point, there is a place where I can connect the shaft, but it's a small shaft, it's very thin. Most of the shafts turning is gonna be done by the motor further down. What I want you to pay attention to is you keep passing it around, though, is that circuit board that's on the base there. That circuit board is actually measuring how fast, how hard, and in what direction you're turning the wheel. It's going to tell that to the computer. The computer is then going to tell that to the motor. Essentially, what you're doing is you're asking the computer, you're saying, Mr. Computer, I would really, really appreciate it if you would make the front wheels turn at the speed and power that I'm asking you to turn them. Believe it or not, the car can look and say, no. You aren't manually controlling squat anymore. It's a video game. It's a real live video game. You're turning the wheel, providing an input to the car. The car's going to take it and say, yes, this works, or no, it doesn't. You guys were supposed to do active suspensions, active steering, and all that. What is a circumstance where a car might say, no, we're not turning the wheels? At least not the way you want them to turn.
Well, doing ABS takes over, right? In a sense.
ABS, I agree with you that the ABS computer is going to be the one making the decision. What do we call it though when the car is saying, nope, I don't want you to die?
Traction control.
Actually, it's not even traction control. It's what we call stability control. Anybody ever drive and have a car start to fishtail on them? What's that mean? Mr. Williams, since you put your hand on. I asked who had a car fishtail on them when they started to drive. You threw your hand up.
What happened to this?
Isn't
What?
fishtailing?
I see that.
What did you say it is? Yeah. You're going into a turn, whipping it good, and all of a sudden, as your front end's going over here, your back end starts going over here. And you're like, man, I only turned the wheel a little bit, and now the car's going way over. By the way, what was our technical term for that? Not overdrive, but oversteer. I turn a little bit, and the car all of a sudden is like, wah! An oversteer occurs. Conditions out today, there's going to be a lot of oversteers occurring, okay? Because people don't know how to drive in inclement weather. Now, here's what's going to happen. Under stability control, the computer sees you turning the wheel. It's also got what we call a yaw, a pitch, and a roll sensor. It's got 3 sensors. Who uses Waze or Apple Maps or Google Maps? Don't they all tell you your speed anymore?
I don't know.
They tell you the speed of the bus.
How do you think they tell you your speed?
Judging the distance or feet you're going.
Man, you'll give a lot more credit to these code writers that they're doing that. Anybody play games with their phones?
Yeah.
You know, the ones where like you can like move the phone and it says you did the golf swing or you did the baseball bat or whatever. It's called an accelerometer. But yes, it is a motion sensor. It's a specific type of motion sensor. It actually measures by using, you guys talked about, I think you may have brought it up, Preston, I'm not sure. Or it might have been Glorious, last week, G-forces. Even you guys look for your phones from the slides, the same key that gets you guys in the cap. So the gray cap on here.
You could have took credit for it, you could be like, yeah.
Alright,
Horses,
your phone uses the G-forces and it can tell pretty darn close off computation of that, how much speed you're heading in a certain direction.
So is that why when you're saying what we were talking about earlier, and you're talking about the fish sailing, is that the stability control? That's when your wheel feels like it locks up?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That'd be directly what it is. Because what they do now is,
Because they think you're handicapped and like, yeah,
Yeah,
we'll
you're
take
gonna go.
control now.
well, it's not a matter of that, it's a matter of there's been enough time of watching how most people drive. And most people, once they get into a panic situation, lose their ability to think logically. Also, to be honest with you, some of the things that get you out of a crash are not logically intuitive. Meaning, if you start to oversteer, what do you think is going to happen if you try to steer out of that turn?
The opposite direction.
Yeah, if you try to steer out of that turn, what's going to happen?
You're gonna roll.
Well, if you cut it too hard, give it too much gas, then you're just gonna oversteer in the other direction.
First of all, right, so you're going to oversteer the other way. The other thing is, once those wheels stop turning, do they do anything to help guide the car?
No, they just slide.
Once they're skis, once the tires become skis, that tread don't do squat. Which you risk that happening even more if you try to turn hard out of it. Actually, if you want to stop and oversteer, the best thing you can do is go into the turn and pull off the accelerator. Because as you're going into the turn, you're not forcing the G-forces to try to go in the opposite direction. Remember, we have braking thrust, we have braking forces, we have thrust, and we have sideways. Once I'm going sideways, I need to get either my braking or my thrust to overcome that. That's what we're talking about. We're talking about directing the center of gravity. Hey, whoa, stuff we talked about in Wheels and Tires is coming back. Center of gravity. So,
Just want to say one thing. I'm moving, so I'm bringing in a bunch of free food tomorrow morning for you guys. I know a lot of us here, some of us don't even have a house in one place to stay in, so the food will be there. Just take whatever you want. It's frozen, cereal, canned goods, and stuff like that. It'll just be there, so y'all can take it. Whatever doesn't get taken, I'll just bring it to the homeless people. Just want to let y'all know. Tomorrow morning.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
so, again, our whole thing is controlling center of gravity, right? So, stability systems. The whole point of a stability system is it's going to say, I'm watching pitch, that's front to back. Yaw, oversteer, understeer. And roll. Dun, 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 dun. I'm watching those three directions. The minute I start seeing part of my center of gravity move out of where it ought to be, I, as the computer in the car, are going to start controlling a couple things. With an all-electric wreck, can't the car take control of this?
Take complete control.
It can, it won't, because it's not programmed to take complete, but it will mitigate what you're trying to do. Okay? But yes, it can take control of this. It also is going to get control of the brake system. And believe it or not, yo! wake up. And believe it or not, there are systems out there where these springs are even electronically controlled. Anybody got a car that's got sport mode or been in one? You turn the knob, it's got eco, it's got sport, it's got touring. Part of what it does is it controls ride height of the vehicle. It'll actually lower it a little. Using the shocks and some other things, it'll tighten up and tighten the springs down. And it'll actually lower the height of the vehicle to drop that center of gravity a little bit. Because if you're in sport mode, the lower the center of gravity, what's that do to your stability?
More stability, faster you go.
Lower the center of gravity, better your stability. That's why in football, when they start on the line, everybody's crouched down at the lineman. Because the whole point is, get your center of gravity low. Because the lower your center of gravity is, the more stable you are than the guy across from you. So, brave new world. What are my 3 types of power steering now? Electronic, hydraulic, electric over hydraulic. Anytime I have hydraulic, I'm going to have what?
Fluid.
I'm going to have fluid,
Hoses.
hoses, pump,
Reservoir.
reservoir, and what's going to actually turn the pump?
The belt.
The belt. Now, think about this with me for a minute. Given what we just talked about, that every hydraulic system will have, what's one of the reasons why you think manufacturers are trying to get away from hydraulic systems and go to all electric?
Because they got electric motors. I don't even classify them as engines anymore. They're motors now, but you don't need a belt.
Well, A, if I have an all-electric vehicle, I don't have anything to run a belt. But B, what if I have a gas vehicle? You got something?
So with the hoses can break.
First of all, there's a maintenance issue here. If I get rid of hoses, if I get rid of lines, if I get rid of that, if I get rid of all of them, is there anything to leak then? If a customer doesn't have something that can leak on their driveway, then you just potentially make a happier customer?
Yeah.
Yeah, but you just lost, jobs, huge jobs.
True.
Yeah, but guess what? That's not the manufacturer's problem. That's the dealer's problem. That's your problem.
My problem, so it's their problem now.
Not exactly.
I'm glad
They
you
can
think
just
the world
throw you
works
away.
that way, but we'll revisit that.
They can throw you away.
Right up to Ford and smack the shit out of the seat.
Hmm?
What's on the current or?
Well, no, what I'm saying is why, we talked about 2 reasons so far. If I go all electric, I don't have an engine to actually turn the pump. And we just talked about the maintenance concern. Because fluids, anytime we talk about fluids, does that mean there's maintenance involved?
Yes.
Hoses can break. Anything that uses fluids can leak. Now, there's one other reason. What did I tell you? The automaker has really 2 goals. They both come back to the same thing. It's to make money and to save what? Save fuel. Remember I put this on the board? Corporate average fuel economy.
So if it's electric,
What was that?
if it's electric, the belt's not turning the pump, so less stress on the engine, less strain.
Anything I can take off the engine means I'm going to use less fuel. That's why when you go to air conditioning class, one of the things you'll find, newest cars coming out don't use a compressor tied to the engine anymore. They use an electric compressor. We're going over to no no pumps. You want an all-electric power steering. Because again, no pumps, no maintenance, and it's a load off the engine.
I just think it's funny how everyone thinks going electric is more eco-friendly. Have you ever seen a mine where they got the shit and make up these car batteries?
Yeah, but
They're cheap.
so Joe's comment was, it's funny how people think, and he's right, there's an argument there.
Compared to an oil rig, compared to what a mine site they do, dig up shit for batteries, like, it's ridiculous.
And I'll even agree that disposing of the batteries is just as much a problem. But you're looking at it on that level of a picture. What's your consumer and manufacturer worried about?
Like, they think at elementary school level.
Don't knock it elementary school level, just consider what it is. Here's the deal. Right now, as a consumer, I know that if I plug my car into my wall,
It's genius.
no, if I
I have
plug
solar
my,
panels. And they're
if I
amazing.
plug my car into my wall, the fact is, I'm gonna pay roughly 75 cents a mile.
And your electric bill's gonna go high.
Higher, but not by much. It breaks down to about 75 cents a mile. Now, and that's assuming I'm heavy on the throttle and don't have any of these other eco things going on. If I get 10 miles to the gallon and I'm paying $3, say, per gallon, okay? Which, if you take average, that's what people are getting in city driving. You can say, well, they're only paying 30 cents a gallon. Right, I agree with you. We're 30 cents a mile for cost of just the fuel. But let's start adding other things to it here. Bigger picture, I'm paying for oil changes. I'm paying for fluids, I'm paying for belts. All of these other things are maintenance costs. So the total cost of ownership, for me, is higher on that gas guzzling car. Now, there's a flip side to this. I'm not advocating one over the other. The flip side is if everybody goes out and buys a Prius today and throws away their current car, what have we just done to the environment? Yeah, you might think that.
Really not.
Not even. The amount of cost that we just did to the economy by tanking a ton of usable vehicles and basically creating debt, which now means we're going to be doing probably other less intelligent things to try to make up the difference. And vehicles that we could have maintained but are now going through landfills. And it's usually, believe it or not, it's not the tires. It's things like the brake pads that contain hazardous materials. It's things like the fluids. It's things like, here's one for you probably never thought about, seat cushions. That foam doesn't just break down on its own. It is not a biodegradable substance. So you start taking, if everybody goes out and buys a Prius because they want to save on the gas, now we're throwing all of that directly into a landfill. The actual, I was reading an economist recently who made the argument that maintaining what we have to keep it getting its best mileage, long term is probably the best. We want to talk about big picture, eco-friendly, cost savings, kind of everything making more sense together.
You gotta put in money to make money. So it's like, even though everything is expensive for like food and processes and everything like that, yeah, it's probably more expensive than gasoline and oil, but in the long run, this place, yeah. space.
That's what I was gonna say,
Go.
cause if you use enough pressure,
Still
the sun
showing
explodes,
fire.
creates a black hole. Use enough pressure to do that, use up all that batteries in the black
All
hole.
buried out of space, let them Jones just go.
Guess
You
what?
know how big
Once you spend
universe
all
is?
that money on the rocket fuel, let me know how that works, okay?
Now,
We make
if
our
we're
electric
going
rocket.
into that, remember what the black hole is? A never-ending cycle of just
Now,
suction.
all of this.
Sooner or later,
does
it's
bring
going
up
to.
a point, though, and Joe brought up an accurate point. The service that we're gonna try, once they get the shop set up, and what we're gonna talk about a little bit today, power steering fluid, power steering, you might hear some places talk about a power steering fluid flush. There is a machine that a shop can buy that'll do a power steering fluid flush. Basically, you take one of the lines from this, put it to the machine, put the machine back to the reservoir. It's called putting it in series. You basically, the same circuit of hoses, you're sticking the machine in between. And what it'll do is as you run the pump, you turn the wheel, that way you move the valve, and it'll push, well, it'll suck the old fluid in as it pushes new fluid into the system. It's an expensive machine, and not a ton of people do this service. So the fact is, you're probably not really gonna do a flush most of the time you're attacked. What you will do is a power steering fluid exchange. Means you're gonna suck the old fluid out. Oh, actually, before you even suck it out, there's two things you gotta do first. Inspect is number one. I don't wanna exchange fluid for a customer if their fluid looks good.
Right. You want to actually test it yourself.
So I'm gonna inspect, I'm gonna check it. What's the other thing I'm gonna do? RTFE, read the flipping book. Why?
So you know exactly the right way to do it.
I'm not worried about the right way, because I'll be honest with you, this
right
one is
order.
very simple. Suck out, pour in, turn wheel. Suck out, pour in, turn wheel,
Right.
rinse and repeat.
You worry about the right fluid?
The right fluid, because I can put power steering fluid in anything, right, man? Why? Somebody said no. Why did you say no?
Me, I was making a joke about CBS.
Well, if you were making a joke, then you know it's wrong. So why was it wrong?
Why is it wrong? Because power steering fluid isn't exactly fluid that you want to have in everything.
Well, I mean, every car's power steering system, I can put
Yeah.
power steering fluid in, right?
Oh, no, because everything has different, kind of this secrets.
What you talk about, Willis?
But ain't some
For example, aren't some of them like half water? And
How about I say do it different?
it's like some of them are, isn't like some of, yeah, that's what I'm saying, isn't like some of them half water and some of them are like brake fluid?
Alright,
Aren't
well,
there different
none of
types?
them are brake fluid, none of them are half water, but your concept is correct. Some vehicles will take ATF. And you are right, it's because of viscosity. However, are all transmission fluids the same? So you always have to look up what type of fluid it is. Honda has a proprietary power steering fluid. If you don't put Hondas in, the pump makes a lot of noise, it gets unhappy, you're going to be replacing the pump. Ford uses ATF in most of theirs. If you don't put Mercon, which is Ford's ATF, in most of their power steering systems, notice what I said. Most. If you don't put that in most of their power steering systems, you're going to get a pump that's going to sound like all the time. RTFB, read the flipping book. Know what type of fluid you're putting in. Now, what do you think, anybody ever turn their steering wheel all the way till it can't turn anymore? What noise does it make? Or something like that? Okay. First of all, when When I turn the wheel to where it can't turn anymore, that's called the lock. So turning it from lock to lock, that's where they can't turn anymore. There's actually, remember the steering arm? That steering arm is designed to hit a certain spot and not be able to go any further. That's the lock. Once it hits that spot and it can't move anymore, that's the lock. Now, pumps make what?
Circulation.
Whoa. Once I'm at the point where this piston can't move anymore either way, because remember, there's my lines, my piston's here with the seal, right? That's what's going to help this guy go back and forth. Once he hits the point where he can't go anymore, do I got any more fluid flowing? I'm at a complete stop. It's fit. So once I'm there, do I got any flow in anywhere else in the system? In the power steering system. Because once it stops at one spot, can any other fluid flow? That's called deadheading the pump. Means you hit the pressure at the highest it's ever going to go. Because there's no relief. There's nowhere for the fluid to go. It's hitting a wall.
So at that point with the steering wheel, like, feel like
It usually feels tight. You're hearing it because that belt is turning the pump, and the pump's hitting a pressure relief valve where it's dumping fluid back into the reservoir. Because if it doesn't dump fluid back to the reservoir and the fluid's got nowhere to go, what will it eventually do? It'll blow crap up, preferably the pump. By the way, isn't this another argument for doing full electronic steering assist? Because now I don't got to worry about any of this, right? Well, here's the deal. And this is the part I will address for you. And Joe is right in the sense of it does affect jobs. It's going to affect your jobs. The way it's going to affect your jobs are back in the day, it was, I don't want to say simple, but it was simpler. You had a power steering concern. You dipped your finger in, you checked the color of the fluid, you checked the smell of the fluid, you made sure there was no visible leaks, and you checked your belt. Because if the belt was bad, was it going to turn the fluid?
No.
And then you just did a visual of the pump, the fluid. That was it. That was the maintenance of it. Now, you have to know how to operate the scan tool. One of the things you're going to find when we go to do alignments, there are vehicles. Now, I got to grab the other steering column at some point today, but do you see anything on here, on either side, that's going to mark where center is on the steering wheel? Theoretically, once this is bolted in,
It ain't gonna do that, but.
well, the only reason why it won't do that is because of how it's connected to the rack. Hello.
I want to learn.
What do you need, Miss Viviana?
Tell me a time.
You can do survey.
No, not you for you. It's for school.
Oh.
Big one. Because we
Oh.
have 4%. But yeah, just give me time. Time we can, because Jen wants us to go over.
Okay. Do you want to do it when we get back from break? You can do that.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. So theoretically, this on its own has no center point. Now, here's the problem. Remember I told you those sensors? If you don't tell the car that that's straight ahead, does the car know it?
No.
There's nothing mechanical to let it know that this is straight. Especially if you've been going down the street for a month, going like this to go straight, because you hit a big old pothole and your line's been off. Now you go like this.
They say it's not straight, it's not straight.
Guess what the car thinks it's going to want to be trying to do the whole time? And so the whole way, remember, we talked about poles. So theoretically,
How you use the car.
what was that?
That's their own, they used to you.
Well, there is a certain amount of adaptation that it can do, but you can't go from 10 degrees off, go right back and hope it's going to adapt the first time you roll down the street. It don't work like that. And if you do that alignment, you send it out, the customer can now have a pull complaint. What's a pull mean again? No, what's the difference between a pull?
The car pull it a certain way that they want to go temporary.
Pull, drift, wander, we talked about them on Wednesday. When I talk about a pull, what's a pull doing?
It's moving the car a certain way while you're trying to drive street.
Right, means I'm almost fighting the wheel to keep it where I want it. If it's a drift, what does that mean? Am I fighting the wheel? Everything's fine until I do that. And then when I do that, then the car starts to slowly go over one way or the other. A wander would be what?
Back and forth. You're trying to stimulate it.
Okay. So theoretically, can't I have power steering cause a pull concern? Especially with electronic, because you're going to do an alignment. If you don't reset the computer, if you don't tell it, hey, I did everything, where the steering wheel is now is straight ahead, then the computer is constantly going to try to take you back to what it thinks straight ahead is.
So you got like calibrated pace.
Yes, it's exactly what you got to do. On our racks, the racks are a little bit older, so you have to use a scan tool to do it. Some racks will actually come with their own scan, like the newest of the new. You'll probably only see them in a couple of dealerships here and there, maybe a fleet shop. But some racks come with their own, basically their plug-ins. Not a scan tool, but it is. Plugs into the car and you can tell it, yep, the alignment's done.
Right, the rack.
Calibrate to center.
The rack itself communicates with the computer and
Yep.
actually.
Yeah, because when you do your adjustments, you actually have to plug in to the car. Do you think one of these old hydraulic ones could give you a pull concern?
Maybe the
Yeah.
motor.
How?
With either a damaged line.
Let's say you're, as you said, you hit a pothole and your toes off. Now your hydraulic is used to having this certain amount of pressure into it.
Hydraulics are stupid though, they don't know no different.
No, it would be more towards your leaking hydraulic, or if your gear itself was worn down, your,
Well, the valve, not the gear, but the valve. Yeah, I could have an internal leak in the valve. What if I have a leak in the piston right here, it's sealed?
That's what a gear is.
Well, there's the pinion gear.
If you have a leak in the pump, isn't it not giving enough pressure for it to go?
on the pump
You
and
can,
the
you can
valve.
have, that won't give you a pull, but that'll give you a hard steering concern. But you are right, like an internal leak in the pump. What if one of these is loose and coming off?
Isn't it the same thing?
Just lost
A
flow.
little different now though, because if it's in the pump, I got a full system. If I got it here, aren't I getting flow to one side,
Yeah.
but not the other? Couldn't I get a pull concern now? Opposite of the side that's leaking, or actually the side that's leaking would be the pull. Opposite side, the side that's good, would be the one that's actually is forcing the piston the other way. Guess where else you can get a bad leak on these? What about right here where the rack comes through?
What, the shoe,
Well,
what would be covered?
right
in
here,
that?
yeah, the boots.
The boot, that's what it's called.
I've gone under cars, I've done a visual inspection. Sometimes these will get blown up because of like air getting trapped. I've also seen these blown up like a pimple with fluid. You poke it, and all of a sudden power steering fluid or ATF, whatever's in the system, just starts out. Yeah, it's no bueno, not a good day. Okay,
So when you change, when you could just change that part, right?
what?
Like if that was the
The problem is, this isn't actually the seal. This is just there to keep dirt and dust from getting in and getting to the seal. The seal is built into the rack. So if you're leaking fluid out of here, guess what seal is broke? No, it's not the boot, it's the seal action on the inside. So if you're leaking fluid into the boot area, guess what you need to do?
Well, are those
Change the
seals
whole joint.
replaceable, or you
Whole
just
new
get
rack.
one?
That's what I was asking, like, would you just change the whole thing?
Yeah, you guys do the whole rack.
I do that instead of technically on the side, you know, surgery.
Well, we don't do rebuilds anymore. And there's actually a good reason why.
That's good.
Theoretically, couldn't you just rebuild this?
Alright,
Could, but it'd take time.
what's this called again? I know I mentioned it once.
And,
Isn't it control?
and something.
Inner tie rod.
Yeah, and it's all
He said that.
This guy,
That's the end tie rod.
they'll call it a tie rod end or an outer tie rod, either one, an acceptable term. So, one of the things I'm also gonna show you, if not today, tomorrow,
Wait, is that
shakedown.
adjustable?
Huh?
Is that adjustable?
It is. When you adjust the toe on the car, remember how this was into the steering arm? You're actually, see how this has flats on it? You're actually going to be getting a wrench on this and turning this so that it either pulls in or pushes out.
That's convenient if you like swapped out.
1970 to present. Somewhere in there, it's pretty much everything.
It looks recent.
Um,
I think I've seen something.
Now, when you have to replace one of these could go bad.
They still look like that though?
Yeah. When the inner goes bad, you'll be able to do clunk, 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 in and out. Okay? That's how you know the inner's going bad. When the outer's going bad, it's usually this joint out here that's going bad. So you'll feel kind of like a clunk, 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 clunk. Sometimes the customer can hear it. You'll hear it when you do a shakedown. Okay? When you have to replace an outer, you count how many turns you take it off. Because guess what? You're going to want to put the new one on.
Same amount of time.
Same amount of turns. Now, that's still not going to make it dead on. You still got to do an alignment. But that'll at least get you
In the ballpark.
right. This way, I'm not having to sit there for 5 hours turning the inner to try to get it close. These are what tend to go bad the most. Because if you think about it, they're taking all that strain on the steering. All right.
What about that part?
What?
That part with the collar. That part don't go bad.
Well, this part is down the pin gear. Now, the part that goes bad, I'll talk a little bit about after break, but it's the intermediate shaft. See this right here? Keep in mind, when you're driving down the road, does the car go over bumps? Any of you drive in Philadelphia, I guarantee the car goes Okay? Now, here's the problem. We need to be able to go over bumps. And keep in mind, this is mounted on the frame like this somewhere, on the subframe. The steering wheel's here. So this is gotta be able to be at an angle and still turn. And the steering column's gonna have to be able to go in and out.
Anytime you got more moving parts, the likelihood of having to repair something increases.
Yes. This right here is called the U-joint. This shaft, what connects your steering wheel to this, is what's called the intermediate shaft. See how that's a very smooth machined metal? It's missing part of it. I'll dig it out after break. But it actually slips. The other part of the shaft will be able to slide up and down. That way, as you're going over a bump, and your steering wheel stays where it is, but this is going, and with the wheels, the column can actually slide a little. And the U-joint allows it to be at an angle, but still turn. These can wear out, so can the slip area. And there's usually a bushing in there so the vibrations don't travel from this up to your hand.
So it really just depends on which one you got, where it will break that.
Well, we can go over it, but basically it's gonna be a whole lot of grabbing and shaking. Grab, shake, grab, shake. Do you feel vibration there? Do you feel movement or not? Now, everything we've been talking about has been the rack and pinion. We got this guy too. You will not see him anywhere near as often. Okay? He is on the big school van. You're going to see him on heavy duty trucks. 18-wheelers use a supersized version of him. He's called a recirculating ball gear. Remember I said earlier, Michelle, when you brought up, I said gearbox? This is why I left it a gearbox. Because I can have a rack and pinion, or I can have a steering gear. Basically, the way this works, see these 3 holes? That's where it's mounted to the frame. It's actually going to be mounted on the inside of the frame, like that. So there's my frame rail. Here's where the steering column comes down to. It's still going to have a U-joint, like that, or what we call a rag joint. Sometimes instead of a U-joint, they use a piece of rubber in there. Okay? Same job. Allows a little bit of flex. Keep in mind, this guy's mounted at more of an angle, so I don't gotta have as much of a turn. When you turn this, it's going to turn down here. We're gonna have to get vice grips on it. Notice, it's still got holes for power steering. So just like on the rack, I got a valve up here. So as I start to turn the wheel, the valve's going to push fluid to help me do my turn. And then this is called a pitman arm. This is actually going to pull the bars that are the linkages. Now, this one's a little crazy because this one's not as simple as just an inner and outer tie rod. This one's going to have what they call a drag link. It's a long tube that goes from this down to all the other links and the gears and stuff. And then as I turn it, it's going to drag it across, do all that.
I didn't think I was gonna let y'all go the whole day without talking about that Dolphins game, did you? Don't be hiding your face. We're trying to give you the NFC East, y'all don't want it. Neither do we. I heard the Giants are gonna try it.
When I see them walk past that window, I knew.
Right, we trying to give it a we don't want to use it.
Still got $8.
The Cowboys are
Yeah.
The only person won on the Eagles, Carson. Carson balled his heart out yesterday.
Well, what?
That game was trash.
Recirculating balls. Yeah.
Win at the end,
They should have kept the
So you only find that in trouble.
Any more? Yeah. I mean, here's the deal. The downside to this, it is a lot heavier. There's also more play, there's more space.
Exactly.
So usually there's a little bit of lag. Anybody ever drive like an old Ford pickup truck, you start turning the wheel and nothing happens down as the front wheel's got? The reason why is because see this cover right here? That nut and that? The gear that comes straight down, it's a spiral gear, that doesn't get changed. However, the gear that's connected to my pitman arm is tapered. It's actually got an angle to it. You know, the teeth are thinner on one end, fatter at the other. And I can either pull it tighter in to that spiral gear or drop it a little further out. If I pull it too tight together, what do you think the problem is? If I jam two gears too tight together, it doesn't turn, it locks. What happens though if it's got too much space?
It doesn't turn. Or too much.
Yeah, well, when I turn this, nothing happens here yet. When these age, that's what happens. As a little bit of the spiral gear wears out, as a little bit of that guy wears out, space opens up. Which means you gotta loosen this nut.
That's too much.
And you see how there's an Allen head in there? You can put one of your little Allen keys in it. You can actually turn that to tighten this up and pull the gear up or down a little. That takes some of that play out. Okay? Now, what's cool about these?
You just want to swap the whole piece of.
They're a lot more adjustable, but they're going to require more maintenance. They're heavier. Heavier means what? What's heavier going to mean?
More reliable.
Well, maybe more reliable. I'll actually tell you. Ford used those for years. You know what broke on Ford? Wasn't the gear. The frames would rust.
I was about to say, I had that.
When you would turn the wheel, the frame would rust so badly at some point, it would rip the frame. So now you're turning your steering wheel, and remember, just like the rack, if this isn't mounted solid, the pivot arm's not going to turn. The whole thing will just. Yep. It would actually rip the frame apart at the front.
I had one of them on the old welding truck that I used.
Ford still puts it. Ford, Chevy, they still put them on and Dodge does too. Dodge does it on the 3500. Ford and Chevy started at the 2500. They put it on there.
That is fine, but they didn't
Yeah.
put it on the.
Nobody's putting it on the 150 or 1500s anymore. Nope.
Not even like an 08?
Nope.
No.
You gotta go back to get on an F-150 or a Chevy 1500, you gotta go back to like 98.
Makes sense, the welding truck I had was like an 80s, like an 86.
Yep. Because it is more weight and it requires more maintenance. And the power steering, you see how heavy that is. What one do you think the power steering is doing more assist with? This or this? That big old chunk of iron. Okay? So where are we at time-wise? Right. So, how about this? What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna stop here. Somebody wanna help me get, somebody who hasn't done it yet and has a license, wanna help with pulling the minivan onto the rack? But part of my goal is that every one of you, I would like to have the experience of getting the car placed on the rack properly before this class is over.
It's not easy driving me.
What?
Josh Gary.
Alright, you're on driver duty. Alright, we're gonna get the minivan placed.